The village lay heavy under a sky of dull iron. Smoke curled from crooked chimneys, drifting low over wooden huts patched with bark and straw. A late autumn wind carried with it the sharp smell of earth and damp hay, whispering through the naked birch trees that lined the dirt road. Life here, on the edge of Russia's endless steppe, was harsh even in the best of times, and in times of sorrow it was merciless. At the center of the road stood Darya Ivanovna, a widow not yet 30. Her hands clutched the rough wool of her shawl, pulling it tight around her shoulders as though she might disappear inside it. But no shawl could hide her humiliation. Only that morning, her in-laws, her dead husband's brothers and their wives, had forced her to kneel on the kitchen bench of their izba. They had taken shears meant for sheep and hacked away at her long, dark braid, the pride of her youth, the comfort she had carried since girlhood. The strands now lay in the dirt like so much refuse, while laughter and muttered prayers to tradition echoed in her ears. "Widows do not wear the hair of maidens," her sister-in-law had hissed, yanking the braid away. "You belong to no man now, and you'll not tempt another with your vanity." When the deed was done, they turned on Katya, her daughter of 8 years. The little girl cried and fought as the scissors chewed through her thin plaits. The in-laws said it was for purity, for modesty, but in truth it was spite, an ugly mark to show the village that neither mother nor child belonged anywhere anymore. Now as Darya stood on her porch with Katya clinging to her skirt, shame burned hotter than the sting of the shears. She could not bear the way her neighbors looked at her. Old men walking to the tavern shifted their eyes, as though not to see her would erase her dishonor. Women carrying buckets from the well whispered behind their hands, lips curling in both pity and relief. Pity for Darya, relief that misfortune had not fallen on them. Katya pressed her shorn head into her mother's hip. "Mama," she whispered, voice small as a trembling bird. "Why did they do it?" "I didn't do anything wrong." Darya swallowed, her throat thick with tears. She wanted to tell the child something soothing, something that would make the hurt smaller, but no words came. What defense could she offer against cruelty dressed up as custom? Against family who had turned her into an outcast the moment her husband's body was lowered into the churchyard earth? The wind grew colder. Darya guided Katya back inside their dim, cramped hut. The fire in the stove had gone nearly out. Only a dull red glow clung to the embers. She set a log onto the coals, coaxing them to life with her breath. Though the wood was damp and smoked more than it burned, the hut smelled of smoke and cabbage soup gone sour, the smell of poverty. Katya sat on the bench staring at her hands. The uneven tufts of hair stuck out from her head, in pitiful angles. Darya's chest ached. Gray evening was settling over the village. Snow had not yet fallen, but the air already carried the bite of frost, and every step along the clay road echoed in the stillness. From around the bend appeared a rider, a tall Cossack in a long black burqa, his mustache as dark and sharp as raven's wings. His horse exhaled clouds of steam, hooves thudding steadily in the mud. People at the well fell silent, stealing glances. Rare was the stranger who came to this forsaken place. The rider sat straight in the saddle as though the air itself bowed to his will. This was Stepan Fyodorovitch, once a soldier in the cavalry, now a landowner on a distant farmstead. His name carried with it a reputation for stern fairness, though to Darya he was nearly a stranger. She stood on the porch of her dim hut, her child clinging behind her. The wind had blown her scarf askew, and nothing could hide the rough ends of her shorn hair. When Stepan halted his horse at her gate, shame burned hotter than the cold. She wanted to turn away. "Is it true?" he asked hoarsely, eyes fixed on her. "Your braid? They did this to you?" Darya's lips trembled, but she could not answer. Words stuck in her throat. Only little Katya whispered through tears, "Mister, they cut mine too." Stepan leaned forward in the saddle, his eyes flashing with fury. He turned his gaze toward the villagers lingering nearby, but none dared speak. As always, they dropped their eyes, pretending nothing had happened. "Disgrace," Stepan said sharply. "Men in this village and not one to defend a woman and a child?" The silence thickened, broken only by a dog barking from a neighbor's yard. He swung down from his horse, removed his cap, and stepped closer. His voice softened. "Darya Ivanovna, enough. You will not endure this alone," she whispered, hardly audible. "But where would I go?"
"I have no one."
Stepan extended his hand, strong, steady, like the very earth itself. "You'll come with me. My home is wide, my bread is plenty, and your honor, No one will drag it through the dirt again. Daria froze, her heart hammering between fear and hope. She looked at Katya, who for the first time that day smiled, a small, fragile smile. And in that moment, Daria understood. There was no choice left. The village road lay hushed, every hut watching without daring to be seen. Stepan's words hung in the cold air like a bell's toll. He stood firm before Daria, his hand still outstretched. Not as a demand, but as a promise. Daria's breath came shallow. Her whole life she had been told to endure, to bow her head, to accept what fate and family decreed. But here was this man, speaking as if her dignity was not a thing to be traded or shamed, but something worth defending. She wanted to believe him, yet fear coiled in her chest. What will people say? She asked at last, her voice barely more than a whisper. The question carried all her dread, the gossip, the condemnation, the muttered judgments that already weighed on her. Stepan's dark eyes held hers steadily. Let them talk. Let them choke on their words if they wish. You've carried enough burdens alone. A man who fears whispers is no man at all. His voice was deep, unshaken, like the sound of a river breaking through ice. For a moment, Daria felt warmth in it, something stronger than the fire struggling in her hearth. Katya tugged at her sleeve. Mama, can we go, please? The little girl's face shone with a mixture of hope and desperation. To her, Stepan's presence was not frightening but safe, like a wall that no cruelty could pass through. Daria turned her face toward the shadows of the village. She could almost hear the silent judgment spilling from shuttered windows. Yet when she looked back at Stepan, at his broad shoulders, his steady stance, the quiet conviction in his tone, she realized those eyes in the dark held no power over her unless she let them. Her hands trembled as she slipped Katya's small fingers into Stepan's waiting palm. He closed his strong hand around them both, a silent vow. Then it settled, he said. You're coming with me. The words struck like thunder across the frozen street. No one dared move, no one dared argue. The Cossack had spoken, and his voice was law enough. For the first time since her husband's death, Daria felt her spine straighten. Fear still clung to her, but beneath it stirred something new. Hope. Fragile, yet alive. The horse snorted as Stepan lifted Katya into the saddle, settling her securely in front of him. The girl's laughter bubbled out, hesitant at first, then brighter, like a spring bubbling through thawing earth. Daria stood frozen at the gate, clutching her shawl, still half afraid to take the step that would change everything. Come, Stepan said, extending his hand again. His tone held no impatience, only certainty, as though her place had been decided long before this night. Daria drew in a long breath. Behind her, the hut loomed dark and small, filled with smoke, hunger, and sorrow. Before her, the road stretched wide into the gathering dusk. She thought of the whispers, the in-laws who had cut her braid, the pitying eyes of the villagers. Then she thought of her daughter's smile, bright for the first time in weeks. Slowly, she placed her hand in Stepan's. His grip was firm and warm. With one strong pull, he lifted her up behind Katya, seating her on the horse's back. The burqa at his shoulders brushed against her arm, carrying the faint scent of leather and wood smoke. The village lay silent as they started forward. Windows flickered with lamplight, faces hidden behind curtains. No one spoke, but Daria could feel their stares pressing against her like stones. She sat straighter, refusing to bow her head. If they would judge her, let them. She was no longer theirs to shame. The horses' hooves struck rhythmically against the road, carrying them past the last row of huts and into the open steppe. The wind was sharp, carrying the scent of frost and distant pine. For the first time in months, Daria's lungs filled freely, as if she had been choking all this time and now remembered how to breathe. Katya twisted to look up at her mother. Mama, she whispered, are we free now? The question struck deep. Daria pressed her lips to her daughter's shorn head, eyes stinging. Ahead, Stepan rode silent but solid. A man who had spoken words no one else had dared. You're coming with me. Yes, my dove, Daria whispered back. We're free. The horse carried them onward toward a new life, the stars beginning to burn above the endless Russian sky. By the time they reached Stepan's homestead, night had fallen fully. The moon hung low and pale, throwing silver light across the wide courtyard and the timbered house that rose solid against the steppe. Smoke curled from its chimney, steady and welcoming. To Daria, it looked less like a building and more like a fortress, one built not of stone, but of strength and constancy. Stepan swung down from the horse and lifted Katya carefully into his arms. The girl's head had drooped against his chest, already heavy with sleep. Daria dismounted more slowly, her legs stiff from the ride and her heart uncertain. She had never crossed this threshold before, though she had dreamed of safety. Now that it was here, she trembled. Inside, the warmth of the stove enveloped them instantly. The room was simple but full. Racks of dried herbs hung from beams. Sacks of flour were stacked neatly in a corner, and heavy quilts lay folded on benches. It smelled of bread, wood smoke, and the faint tang of horse leather. To Daria, who had been staring at empty cupboards for weeks, it felt like abundance itself. Stepan laid Katya gently on a bed tucked into the wall, covering her with a thick blanket. The child stirred, murmuring something soft before sinking deeper into sleep. Daria stood watching, her hands clasped, her throat tight. "You're safe here," Stepan said, turning toward her. His voice carried no boast, only certainty. "No one will touch you. No one will shame you again." Daria's eyes filled, though she fought the tears. "I don't know how to thank you." "You don't need to," he replied simply. "A man does what's right. That's all." For a long moment, the crackle of the fire was the only sound between them. Daria lowered herself onto the bench, her body suddenly weary, as if every burden she had carried now demanded its toll. Yet beneath that exhaustion was something new, a fragile seed of peace, trembling but alive. She looked at her sleeping daughter, then at Stepan standing firm in the firelight, and thought perhaps tomorrow would not be filled with shame. Perhaps tomorrow could belong to them. And for the first time in many months, Daria allowed herself to believe in tomorrow.